Minimum length of timesheets is also important. By default, it's 15 minutes, which means that any shift shorter than that gets automatically deleted. If you want any punch to count regardless of time, you can move this down to a different interval, maybe even 1 minute. Rounding of timesheets just means that it will move the time of the timesheet forward or backwards to get to the closest time that you set below. If you don't want any rounding, feel free to leave this off and ignore the settings below. Allow employees to clock in early to shift is a quick on-off option, so set this to your store policies. If set to no, employees will simply see an alert when they try to clock in that they are not able to clock in early. Now scrolling back up, let's look at notifications and integrations. These aren't necessary, but many of them are helpful if you start allowing people to clock in via web and mobile. Scrolling down, we'll touch on a few of the really useful ones. Late to clock on and late to clock off. Send an alert if someone is late to clock on or off. Clicking the edit button next to it, we can set who receives these alerts. The employee, the manager, or both. We can also set the time that the employee must be late before this is triggered. Another one that's useful is clocking far away from location. This one is not enabled by default, so we'll scroll down to find it. Let's click activate next to it, and we'll be presented with some options. This is used for clocking in from a mobile device, and we can set how far away the employee is allowed to clock in before the manager is alerted. Let's set this to 20 yards, turn it on for all locations, and save it. You can scroll through these and see if there are any other notifications you may want to turn on, and feel free to activate items that aren't yet. For now, we'll jump over to clocking in via the web and work on that.
All right, so bear with me 1 second while I get out of this full screen. I did mention in there that I didn't want to review clocking via SMS on this webinar. That's because it's just really difficult to show. It's a little challenging. Essentially, I'll talk through it real quickly. It's not widely used, but essentially how that works is if you have your schedules being published and you're sending those as text, the employee gets a text message that says, here are your shifts for the week. The employee then is able to start their shift by texting that number back the day of their shift and saying, start shift. And then it comes back to them and says, are you starting your shift at this time? And so on, and they can say yes to that. Again, not widely used. It's missing a lot of the features that you're going to find on the web or on the kiosk. But I just wanted to highlight it. Again, it's hard to demo, but I just want to highlight that it is an option for people who would prefer to clock in that way. All right, so now we're going to talk about clocking in through the web.
First, we're going to clock in via the web. Looking at my homepage, you can see on the left side that I'm scheduled to work in sales today from 6 to 10. I'm currently late, which is indicated in red text here. If I click on the break details button, it tells me that I have a 30-minute unpaid break during my shift. Clicking start shift will do just that. You'll see that my options are now changed. I have a red break button, an end shift button, and an update button. Let's start with the update button. Clicking on that will pop up a window showing me how long my shift has currently gone on for and allow me to change my start time. Perhaps I actually got here at 6, but I forgot to clock on. So I can change that now. Bear in mind that this feature is completely optional. It can be turned off in settings at any time. So you can disable this if you'd like. The employee can also set a comment that their manager can see to explain the update. Starting a break just allows you to start your break. Clicking this will pop up a window letting you know that your break has started, and the text on the left-hand side is now updated to show me how much time I have left remaining on my break. When I'm done, I simply click End Break, and I'm back to this screen. Remember, ending a break early is an option as well, so if you want to force the breaks to be taken at full length, that is also possible. When I'm done with my shift, I'll click End Shift, and it will ask me to validate my data. You'll notice that I have another opportunity here to edit my time. Again, this is completely optional. Assuming everything is correct, I'll click End Shift, and it will be back at the main screen. That was a shift I was scheduled for, but let's look at what happens when I'm not scheduled for a shift, but I come in anyways. Maybe to help out or to cover for someone. You'll notice that it now says no scheduled shifts, as it knows I'm not supposed to be working today. If I click on Start Shift, it'll ask me what area I'm working in. I'll select the area that I'm working in via the drop-down and hit Start Shift. The rest of this will behave exactly the same way as a regular shift, with the only difference being that on the timesheet side, we won't be able to see the variance between the scheduled start and end time and the actual times. I'm going to end this. You'll see it's a 1-minute shift. This is the option that I alluded to earlier. Based on our options, the minimum shift length is 15 minutes. So this is telling me that because I only worked a 1-minute shift, it's going to delete this timesheet. It prompts me again down here in the bottom right. Now that we have a worked shift, let's look at the timesheet that was generated as a result. Clicking on the Timesheets button, click Approve Timesheets. You can see that we now have a pending timesheet, and below is all of the information about that shift worked. Up top, you'll see the schedule details. I was supposed to work 6 to 10, which obviously didn't happen by looking at the start and finish times below. As a manager, I can now update these to reflect the accurate times if I'd like. On the bottom right, you'll also see an embedded Google map that shows the location I worked. This is the main difference in each clocking situation, so I'll touch on this each time.
Okay, so that was clocking in via the web. I did see one question come in that I think is for the good of the group, so I'll address it here. There's a question about if breaks aren't taken, is it possible to force them, or does it still count those hours? So there are a few settings within there that you can say, I force a break to be taken. You can have it auto clock out for breaks. That's an integration. And you can also do something at the end of the shift where if one's not taken, it'll suggest them. So it says, did you take your break from 6 to 4 or whatever, 4 to 6, whatever your break time is. So there are a few options there that you can also highlight in order to make that a little more manageable. Moving on to mobile. So again, that was clocking in via the web, probably one of the lesser utilized ones. We see a lot of activity on mobile and then a good amount on kiosk as well. So this section here is where you're going to see where most people are going to experience.
We'll take a look at mobile. The functionality of this is largely the same as the web version, with the main difference being the GPS lock it takes when you log in or out. The same rules apply in terms of timesheet length, ending breaks early, and so on. Looking at this screen, it's obviously more information dense, and it has things easily accessible such as upcoming shifts, available shifts, etc. We'll cover all of those options shortly, but the information density of this screen is one of the reasons we find people use mobile clock in more than any other method. It gives you a great deal of information and usability in a small space. Looking towards the top, we have the same information that is available on the web. It shows that I'm scheduled to work in sales from 11:15 to 11:45 this time, and clicking on shift details gives me more information about that shift. Interestingly, this one shows me how far away I am from the location in the top right. So if I know that my store has alerts turned on for distance from location, I also know that clocking in right now will alert my manager. Clicking cancel in the top left brings me back to the home screen. Clicking start shift this time does not immediately do so. It instead brings me to an informational screen that shows me where I am, where I'm supposed to be, and gives me a rundown on the details of the shift that I'm clocking onto. Assuming everything looks good here, I'll click Submit in the top right to begin my shift. The app will briefly say starting shift before beginning, at which point my options will then resemble those on the web. I'll briefly stop here to talk through a couple of things visible on the screen. If you scroll down a bit, you'll see a section for tasks. While not directly related to clocking in and out, I do think this is commonly interlaced into the clocking functionality, so I want to touch on it quickly. There are a few different types of tasks, but the one that I want to talk about here is shift tasks. Tasks can be assigned to a shift, and now that I'm logged into a shift, if tasks are present, they will be visible here. Clicking into shift tasks, I can see along the bottom that me and my team are responsible for closing procedure. Clicking into that, I can see that there are 3 tasks within that task group that need to be completed by me or my team. While I'm on my shift, these tasks are presented to me and my team, and checking one of them will mark it off so the rest of my team knows not to do it. It looks like 2 of them are already done, so I will complete the 3rd one. As I mentioned, these tasks aren't necessarily part of the clocking experience, but many managers train their staff to look there each day when clocking into their shift. The task can be repeated on a regular interval like daily or weekly, so these can become very powerful and useful if utilized properly. I find that managers use these often enough that it's worth highlighting here, as it's a great feature that can help the delegation of tasks greatly. Going back to the main screen, there are other great features here that I'll touch briefly, such as available shifts. Clicking into that will show me any shifts that people have put up for grabs that I am suited for. If I want to take one, I can claim it, and it will be transferred into my name. It looks like Bob has offered one up here that I'm suited for. Let's take this one. Finally, upcoming shifts shows my shifts in the future. It allows me to easily schedule my life around my work schedule and vice versa. Clicking into the shift, I can action any shifts in the future, like swapping it with other employees or offering it up. These things are so easily done in the app that we often see managers loving the hands-off approach to schedule changes. Of course, you can require a manager approval for shift swapping, or you can turn it off completely. Let's offer this one up to Bob. Done. Okay, moving back to the clocking in experience. Coming back to the home screen, we're now back to where we started. A clock button has appeared on the left, which simply reiterates the shift details when I click on it. I can start my break here as well, which again prompts me with the screen detailing my distance from the physical location of the store I'm working in. Once again, punching here will alert my manager if that notification is enabled. Clicking End Break will also end it, bringing me to a screen similar to the Start Break screen. Finally, the End Shift button will give me a similar screen, giving me a full rundown of my entire shift before allowing me to submit my timesheet. This follows the same rules as the web, so if the shift length is too short, it will alert me here as well. Now that we have a timesheet created from the app, let's jump over to the web to look at the differences between a web-created timesheet versus a mobile-created timesheet. Okay, so here is a timesheet that we created from the mobile app. Looking at the timesheet, you'll see that everything is largely the same. You still have the same details, the same schedule information, and the same map in the bottom right. The only difference here is that since your phone has GPS, it shows you where the employee clocked in from. In addition to the alerts that you can set up to receive notifications of people clocking in far away, this allows you to audit where employees are clocking in from. The red dot indicates my hardware store, where I was supposed to clock in, and the green dot is where I actually did clock in. Quite a distance away. Finally, there are options to have timesheets auto-approve if a certain criteria are met. If clock-in times are within a certain variance, if the person takes the correct amount of lunch breaks, etc. This is one of the things that will stop auto-approval. So if your system is set up correctly, that means you'll just have to audit the timesheets that do not auto-approve. Meaning that if people clock in where they're supposed to, it will automatically approve and you won't even need to touch them. For the last look, we're going to jump over to clocking in from kiosk next.
All right, so we are going to, like I said, we're going to hop over to the kiosk next.
Next, we'll take a look at.
Sorry. One question I did see pop up is setting up kiosk. I do touch on it briefly in here, but the long and short of it is just that an administrator has to download the kiosk app on either an Android or an iPad tablet and log in as themselves. So anyone that's an administrator can log in and set up a tablet or a kiosk on either one of those two types of tablets. So that's kind of the long and short of setting it up. It's pretty simple. I do talk through it a little bit on here. Also, on this video, when I switch over to the timesheet is when I think my microphone messes up, so I apologize. There's a little bit of sound variance, but I'm sure it'll be fine. I did see a question that I wanted to touch on the mobile as well, though. It was about blocking clocks. Essentially, if someone clocks in outside of the radius that you set, we don't ever block clocks because the GPS could be wrong on their phone, and it could say they're somewhere that they're not. So we do alert the manager, but we never block clock-ins. So, okay, moving on to kiosk. See this great picture.
Now we'll talk about clocking in and out on the kiosk. The kiosk app can be loaded on either an iPad or Android tablet, and functionality across the two are largely the same. I'm using an iPad today, but most of what you see will carry over to an Android tablet as well. Most people will mount these in the break room or any other general area where employees may gather. The app also works in either orientation, and right now I'm using it in portrait. A tablet has to be set up by an administrator at your location, and once it's set up, you will always launch to a screen similar to this. The list on the left-hand side is simply the list of employees that are at your store, and the right-hand side, by default, shows your newsfeed. Looking at the tabs along the top of the left-hand side, you'll see we are currently seeing all employees by default. Or we can click on the On Shift or Scheduled buttons to see those buckets of employees as well. There's also a search bar right above these. So if there's a long list of employees on the left-hand side and the employee doesn't want to scroll and find their name, they can simply type it in. On the right-hand side, our newsfeed is shown by default. This will only show posts directed to the entire store. You won't see other people's messages. The other tab is titled Face Unlock. This is a newer feature, and it allows employees to clock in without having to touch the screen and enter a PIN. If this is selected, the employee simply comes into frame of the photo, and if Deputy can make a match based off of the employee's profile photo, it will clock them in. We'll skip that for now and proceed with the PIN clocking, but just know that you can now clock in without ever touching the device. Scrolling down the left side, let's look at the shift for Bob Ross. The blue dot indicates that Bob is scheduled for a shift today. You can see the red dot on my name indicates that I'm late for my shift. Clicking on Bob's name will prompt me to enter his PIN, which I'll do here. You can also request a new PIN be generated on that last screen if you forget for any reason. Now I'm presented with a new screen where I can action my shift. Most times employees will simply clock in here, but let's take a look at what else is on the screen. First, it shows us our shift details so the employee can see where they're working, what times they're working, and if they're scheduled for a break. Looking along the left side, you can also see that the newsfeed is the top option. Clicking here, you'll see the same newsfeed post that we saw on the main screen. But now that I'm logged in, I can action it. Here in a second, you'll see a ton of posts load on this left-hand side. Just ignore those. This is also our demo environment, so you're seeing a lot of junk that sits in there as well. So I can make a comment on this post if I wanted to. I can also confirm it. So if someone posted this and required that all employees confirm that they saw it, I could simply click on I confirm. And now whoever posted that can see that I confirmed that message, meaning that I saw it. Going down the list, you'll see a task button. Tasks that are assigned to a particular area won't show up until the employee is clocked into that area, so we won't see anything here quite yet. The schedule button simply takes me to my schedule for the month. And I can do a few things here. I can see my schedule for the entire month of November, which I'm in, or I can scroll and see scheduled for the future. You can also see that there's a button here that says one open shift. If I was to click into that, you can see that someone that has a shift that is open that day, they said they can't work. So I can do a couple things here. I can claim this shift, which I'll do here in a second. You can also see that I can add unavailability and request leave from this screen as well. So if I were to want to do one of those two things, I can click on any day and put an unavailability or leave. So if an employee does not want to use their mobile phone for those types of things, they can use the kiosk. Going back to the open shift, however, I will just click on claim and it pops up and tells me I'm going to claim that. I'll say claim. And now you can see that this shift is blue and it's in my name, showing me that I'm working on the 17th. Finally, clicking on the Me tab just brings me back to the clock-in screen. Once I click Start Shift, it will pop up a screen that says the area that I'm working in and the time I'm starting that shift. Once I click on Start Shift again, it will take a photo of me to ensure that the person clocking into the shift is actually the person working it. So let's try that. All right, now that the shift has started, you'll notice that the task button has a number on it now. So going to that, you can see that there's now a new task button under the top two that says closing procedure. Clicking into that, I can see that there are 3 items assigned to my area today. So as I do them, I can either do it on my phone or I can come back to the kiosk and simply check them off to let my employers and fellow employees know that I've done them. Going back to the Me tab, you can obviously also start and end your breaks here and end your shift as well. You'll notice that there's also a voice indicator beneath those 2 buttons, indicating that you can speak to the kiosk as well as clicking the buttons. That's rolled out with the new feature to clock in via photo. So with the whole idea of not having to touch the screen at all in order to clock in or out, you can also speak to the kiosk as well if it's set up in a kiosk environment. So let's go ahead and end the shift. When I do that, it's going to pop up and tell me how many hours I worked, in my case 2 minutes, what area I worked in, and if I had any breaks. So when I click on End Shift again, it will again take a photo of me to prove that I am who I say I am. So clocking in and out, it will take a photo. So let's do that. It tells me it's going to be deleted, which is fine for this demo. Another great photo. All right, so now that we have a timesheet generated from a kiosk, you can see at the top it's telling me that got deleted, that's fine. Let's go take a look at what that timesheet from a kiosk looks like and how that differs from one from the web and from mobile. All right, looking at the timesheet, you'll see that everything is largely the same as the other two. The only difference here is obviously you can see my photo in the bottom right, instead of the map. You can click into it and see how happy I look with the cow behind me. This is used to confirm again that the employee who clocked in was the actual employee. If the employee has a profile photo, we actually have an integration that will send the manager a notification if the photos do not have a likeness. In this case, since I don't look much like Bob Ross, my manager would have been sent a notification. Finally, clicking on the Comments tab of the kiosk timesheet will show you which kiosk these actions were submitted from, in case you have multiple kiosks submitted around your location. That is it for kiosk timesheets and clock in. Thanks.
All right, so let me get out of this. So now we'll jump to Q&A. So I'm going to start because I saw a few questions that I think were good in the Q&A poll. So I think they're good for the good of the group. So I saw one that asked if someone wants to claim a shift, like if I offer a shift up and that person's at 38 hours and they have a 40-hour work week, how do I prevent them from taking that? Essentially, we do those through something called a stress profile, and that is simply saying that this is the max hours a week this person should work without approval. And what will happen is if I try to offer someone a shift that has that amount of hours already, or they're close to it, or the shift that I'm offering will already put them over that amount, it will not allow me to offer them that shift. So you'll only be able to offer that to people who meet a bunch of requirements with training tags and stress profiles and all kinds of fun stuff that we can talk about in another webinar, but you won't put people in overtime unless you explicitly allow that. Try to see if there's anything else that I think is. So I see one asking about photo not being recognized. I don't know that I understand this question perfectly, but I will say to that, if you have employees that have profile photo set up, which is kind of a prerequisite of using that function, make sure that it's a good, clean front-facing photo of them. I see a lot of people trying to do sideways photo, or they have mask on or something, and then when they go to clock out, it won't recognize them. So just make sure that the photos are fairly accurate in terms of what they look like in actuality. Give it a few minutes, see if any other questions come in. So I did see another question come in about the hours going into overtime. So no, if someone's scheduled for 38 hours, I have a shift at 6 hours that I want them to potentially take. It will not allow me to swap or offer it to them, because it knows they're already scheduled for an amount of hours that would put them at stressed if they were to take that shift. So there's a setting here, auto-approve real-time timesheet. So basically, there's a variance that can be set up, and that just means that the variance is off of a certain amount. So I come in 8 minutes early and I leave 2 minutes late. That's a 10-minute variance. But if the variance matches, if you're within whatever variance you set here, it'll auto-approve that timesheet with a bunch of other criteria, right? Like the pictures being accurate, if they're where they're supposed to be in terms of the GPS logs. There's a few other variables that go into it, but the bulk of it is just this, the variance, as long as that's the kind of the first check. So the tasks don't have a notification built into it. I saw that question come up. We don't notify if a task isn't completed. It's more as just a go back through time and check to see if they were completed. So I see a question about facial recognition. So if there's two options. So if you log in as an administrator and you punch in your PIN, in the top right, there's an option that says how to clock. One is PIN only, and one is PIN and facial recognition. If you do PIN only, it will just do the standard, put your PIN number in, it'll take a photo, which is what I showed there. If you do the facial recognition, it'll default to trying to identify you by your photo. So if you're having trouble with it picking up your photo and it's not making a good match, then I would suggest going to PIN only and allowing it to just take the photo. All right, I'm not seeing anything else, so I'll give it just one more minute. If we don't get anything, then give you guys some time back. We'll see if anything comes in. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I will go ahead and say thanks. I appreciate the time, everyone. We will send a recording out of this with the questions and answers, And I appreciate everyone's time and thanks for jumping on. Have a good day.